What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. You know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, and common sense. And I love you. And if you're sick and tired of politics as usual, hey, this one's for you. Fatty Cannon. As a person of slightly advanced age, I don't know, mid 50s, I remember things like, 9/11, when Islamic terrorists crashed planes into the World Trade Center. I remember when Iran was a great place, an ally. Maybe it had issues, I don't know. But then the radical Muslims took over. They took Americans hostage, students hostage. And it wasn't until Ronald Reagan was elected into office, sworn into office, that they released these hostages. Iran has been an enemy for most of my life. China, Russia, North Korea. But Iran has always been the one that I think, through their funding of these proxies, that have really actually hurt the United States, at least in my lifetime. I understand maybe overall they haven't done that much damage, but in my lifetime, Iran has been the enemy. Israel will launch limited ground invasion into Lebanon imminently. Hezbollah has been firing rockets from the south of Lebanon. Lebanon itself is not the problem. It's the fucking terrorists. And these terrorists get their money from Iran. The defense minister of Israel, Yoav Gallant, told the international community in order to ensure the return of Israel's northern communities, we will employ all of our capabilities, and this includes you, he said to the troops. They took out the leader. They did that pager attack. They did that radio attack. And they have severely crippled Hezbollah in the north of Israel, the south of Lebanon. It's confusing. But that was one of the flanks. I love this one. Young Hezbollah recruit can't believe he's already made regional manager. Yeah, because their leadership has been decimated. Something like 95% of their leadership has been taken out. They are in tatters. A lot of their fighters are just hunkered down in tunnels. Again, tunnels. Hamas tunnels. Hezbollah tunnels. They hide like the fucking rats that they are. But now that leadership, such as Nasrallah, who got blown up with 80 tons of bunker busters, he was basically left in a tunnel to suffocate. The New York Times weeps for his death. And the New York Times claims that this guy who founded Hezbollah wanted equality, which is absolute bullshit. The Muslim religion does not have equality built into it. It just doesn't. Even the most moderate, and I've seen this on things like 90 Day Fiancé, where even the most moderate Muslims in places like Jordan still adhere to this whole ridiculous rules about women. And they probably feel the same exact way about gays. And they feel the same way about Western society. And when you look at their own society, it's pretty decadent itself. But anyhow, back to the main point here. So Hezbollah was up on Israel's northern border. Hamas was in the southern part of Israel. And if Israel made any real moves on Iran, those two terrorist organizations would move in like a pincer maneuver. And then down in the Gulf down there, you have the Houthis, who are also funded by Iran. And they're there to mess around with any ships that come through there, especially Israeli military ships. I don't know how Israel's going to affect this war in Iran. I think a lot of it's going to be airstrikes and small units flown in. Israel, if you look up the raid of Entebbe in Africa, Israel flew their forces into Africa and drove out of the back of a plane in a car made up to look like Idi Amin's personal vehicle and rescued a bunch of hostages that have been taken on an aircraft hijacking. They are not above some really, really far out there shit. And Iran, they're buffered. There's some countries in between Iran and Israel. And that's why Iran doesn't act directly. They use their proxies. Just today, reports came out of Al-Qaeda troops in Africa massacring a village. Those people are getting their paychecks from Iran. So for me personally, before we get into how other people might feel about it, I think it's high time we take out Iran. I don't think the people of Iran like living under this extreme Muslim rule. So, 6 months ago, Iran fired rockets into Israel, and Israel's Iron Dome, with help from the United States, took out a majority of those missiles. I mean, these aren't rockets. These aren't tiny little rockets. These are big missiles, ballistic missiles. And Biden told Netanyahu, take the win. So Israel didn't really do much of a response. They went back to their war against terrorists. But Iran has once again launched ballistic missiles into Israel in response to Israel killing Hezbollah leaders. See, that's how you know for a fact. You could trace the money. But whenever Israel takes out somebody in Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis or Al-Qaeda or whoever it is, Iran issues threats. Iran fires ballistic missiles. Make no mistake about it. Iran is the bad guy right now. They are the ones who are funding these terrorists. U.S. Navy warships shot down Iranian missiles fired at Israel in massive barrage. It marks the second time in less than 6 months that American forces have shielded Israel from an Iranian missile attack. Okay, that's great. First time defense. Hey, Iran, are you really fucking sure about this? Biden did his thing. We'll get into that in a second. But they launched another barrage. But Iran kind of gave notice of the attack. I don't know why. Because it's propaganda for them. Iran, their leaders hold power by taking on the decadent West. But pretty much everything was shot down. So it doesn't really look very good for Iran in terms of defending itself or fighting off Israel, especially if the U.S. joins, which I think they should. Here's Prime Minister Bennett, former Prime Minister Bennett, he sent out a tweet. This is the greatest opportunity in 50 years to change the face of the Middle East. He was arguing that Israel should go after Iran's nuclear facilities in order to fatally cripple this terrorist regime. It's high time we do that. The deterrent Iran had, you could argue, is not just gone. It's smashed into 1,000 pieces. So I think the Israelis are feeling more free to act. And Joe Biden is actually moving another carrier battle group into the Mediterranean, signaling the Iranians that if you hit Israel, you hit the U.S. too. Well, like I said before, I think the time for defense is over. I think it's time we attack Iran. I think it's time that we remove them from the world stage. Biden and Harris, by the way, if you don't remember, gave billions to Iran for peace. But Tehran responded with destabilizing terror. They took that money. I don't care how you can contextualize it and say that it was for humanitarian purposes. They took the money that they were going to use for humanitarian purposes and sent it to these terrorist organizations to protect them from Israel so that they could build nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons. Right? That's what it was. The Biden and Harris strategy of appeasing Iran with tens of billions of dollars in sanctions relief and oil sales only resulted in Tehran's mullahs emboldened to route those funds into a proxy war of terror through Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis that has destabilized the entire globe. It's really hard when the Houthis are shooting at international ships and Hamas and Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda and all of these other terror groups are going around randomly committing acts of terrorism. That destabilizes the globe. Keep in mind, it's worth adding here that in addition to shooting over 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, terrorists also murdered people at a bus stop. Iran is using what's left of its terror organization to hold on to power, right? So at the height of the gas price crisis in 2021, Americans occasionally were greeted at the gas pump by surreptitiously placed stickers of a smirking Joe Biden pointing to the inflated price and proclaiming, "I did that." 3 years later, Biden and his understudy Kamala Harris could easily have been given the same amount of credit for the horror that unfurled in the skies over Israel. They placated Iran. They allowed Iran to sell oil. When Iran sells oil, it funnels monies to its proxies. American voters are presented with a stark contrast to consider an election just 34 days away. Holy shit, that's scary. Trump starved Iran of money and drained its accounts down to a few billion, assassinated Iran's top general, and canceled an Obama-era nuclear deal over clear evidence that Tehran was cheating. As a result, Iranian black aggression waned. How do you think the biggest state sponsor of terror, Iran, is getting their money? Stobler, a Republican from Minnesota, asked. They're allowed to sell their oil on the world market. Now, under Trump, Iran was hurting. They had no money. Now they have over $100 billion to support Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis. Because of Biden's policies. It's a lack of leadership by the Biden-Harris administration. And that kind of shit will continue under Harris. Biden, once again, is talking, him and Blinken and the United Nations are talking about Israel should show restraint in response to the Iranian missile attack. You know, any response might jeopardize the peace deals. Why is it that the UN and the United States think it's okay for terrorists and terror nations to act with no response, all in the name of de-escalation? That's fine. But the days of de-escalation are over. It needs to be escalated. And this sums it up the best. Ayatollah frantically Googles how to build Iron Dome thingy fast. Yeah, because your ass is in trouble, buddy. All right? They had a chance. The Iranian president went down that helicopter crash, if I remember correctly. They put a new guy in. Same as the old dude. They need to change. It's time to go after Iran. The time for de-escalation is over. Let's, take the leash off and let the dogs of war do what they got to do. Well, we had a pretty boring-ass vice presidential debate. Walz stumbles on first question, confuses Israel and Iran, and doesn't really lay forth his plan. Because his plan as a fucking communist is to give in to countries like Iran. Maybe if they're nice, they won't hurt us. I'm sorry, but this is the United States, okay? If somebody is nasty to us, hurt them double. That's the way it should be done. This sums up the whole debate right here. Vance, the debate in emojis done by Bronco. This is one of his best cartoons ever. All right? America first. I love America. The Constitution. Those are the things, whether or not we entirely live up to that. Those are our ideals. Those are the principles that we are supposed to be living up to, okay? No matter how hard those assholes on the left want to tear it apart. But Walz, China, first. I love China. I love Karl Marx, okay? That's who these people are. Walz has said many times that he loves China. Walz is a failure as a governor. I was going to cover it, but there was so much shit, so much money that was lost. One of the biggest single COVID scams happened on his watch. But he wants to bury that. And he wants to worry about putting tampons in boys' bathrooms. I'm sorry, I understand. We can argue about boys' bathrooms and tampons and stuff like that. That's not really the point. The point is that his focus is not on what it needs to be. He never answered that question about what we should do with Israel and Iran right now. Meanwhile, in response to the same question, Vance signaled that he would support whatever Israel decided to do. This is what Vance said. Look, it's up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe. And we should support our allies wherever they are when they are fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question. That's straight, to the point. It's unambiguous. He says we should support Israel. No hemming and hawing, no contextualizing. We need that back again. This is another thing that happened during the debate. A ridiculous fact check of a true statement during CBS debate. J.D. Vance was accurately describing the migrant crisis fueled by Kamala Harris and Joe Biden when CBS moderator Margaret Brenner decided to insert herself with a fact check. Just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, she said smugly. Vance was rightly annoyed and said, the rules were that you guys weren't going to do fact check. Whoa, wait a minute. They're violating their own rules to go after the conservative? And since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CPB One app where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. At which point CBS cut off his mic. Okay. It was made, and then they wanted to fact check that, right? As the author says here, this was the most shameful moment in a long history of shameful moments by the moderators biased against Republicans. They fact-checked the truth, then stopped the politician from responding. It was made all the more partisan by the fact that when Tim Walz told the Howler that illegal border crossings are down compared to when Trump left office, which is not even close to true, no one said a peep. Some facts are too good to check, and that's their thing. The Times went on to try to clarify this and said there is no way for migrants abroad to apply for asylum through an app. The Biden administration, however, established an app that allows more than 1,000 migrants a day to schedule appointments at the point of entry where they can be granted parole through the app. The migrants can then apply for asylum once they're in the United States in immigration proceedings. That program is being shut down, by the way. So if someone went to an appointment through the app, showed up at the border or an airport, they are going to apply for asylum, right? Is there a chance they will be rejected and sent home? No. Then yes, they are applying for asylum through an app. And the fact that they rely on such an idiotic parsing of a phrase, there's only one word to describe it. It's a lie. They are. And what Vance was saying was true. Asylum law requires that the seekers apply in the first safe country they enter. The White House is ignoring this rule. Venezuelans can walk through a half dozen nations where they can apply for asylum, and they still let them apply here. They aren't required to remain in Mexico. In fact, they're being flown around the country. Not to mention that under asylum is for political and religious or racial persecution, not because they want a better economic opportunity. The process is being abused. Yes, the Haitians of Springfield have legal status, but only because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are ignoring the law. This was a nationally televised example of why the elite's obsession with misinformation and fact-checking is a load of horse manure. They don't want to tell the truth. The Democrats want to shut off the mics for anyone who answers the wrong questions or says the wrong thing. They want to purge X, Facebook, and TikTok of any opinions that look bad. This is a totalitarian way of governing, to shut the press down, to shut down dissension. All right, you might be on that side right now, but as we're going to see, they'll attack you too, because they don't give a shit about the average Democrat voter. These are the elites, and what they want is they want total control so they can have everything the way they want it. And in California, the best way to translate that is they want California for the elites and the people who clean their fucking toilets. Bombshell report. High-risk non-citizens without IDs flying across the United States. They're breaking the rules to accommodate the illegal migrants. You and I, we got to take our fucking shoes off. Them, whether or not these people are terrorists or whether or not these people are going to use this rule and exploit this rule for terrorism is immaterial. They are changing the rules to accommodate non-citizens while burdening citizens with unnecessary crap. This is the same thing they do with guns. Gascon famously does not prosecute gun enhancements in crimes. But they want to come after what I have on my rifle. They want to tell me how many rounds I could have in my rifle. They want to tell me how many rounds I could have in my home defense pistol. But when it comes to criminals using guns, they want to kind of sweep it away. And we'll see a little bit more of that later on. One of the big mega donors to the Democrats, Soros, pumped $250,000 into Israel-designated terrorist organization. Okay? The European wing of Al-Haq Human Rights Organization, an Israeli-designated terrorist group. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say they're terrorists because that's what it is. So what is our administration doing? Their cronies of the FCC have approved expedited sale of more than 200 radio stations to George Soros. These radio stations include conservative radio. Gee, I wonder if Glenn Beck's going to be on the air when this is all done and said. Now, this is Soros. He's Hungarian. Okay? He is going to buy 200 radio stations across 40 markets. They were granted a waiver to avoid the foreign ownership national security assessment for the time being. Right, for the time being. Last week, the House Oversight Committee launched an investigation into the FCC's expedited approval for the Audacity Soros deal, arguing that Congress has a compelling interest in understanding why a foreign national deserves such favorable treatment. Why? Because he donates to all of them. By all appearances, the FCC majority isn't just expediting but bypassing the established process to do a favor for George Soros and facilitate his influence over hundreds of radio stations before the elections. This comes from James Comer. Yeah, he's going to buy up all the conservative radio stations and flip them to left-wing propaganda. That's what he's going to do. Watch. 97.1 FM, news station, KNX here in LA. Just watch the slant that hits that thing now that he's going to own it. Like I said earlier, eventually, the lefties are going to run out of conservative things to attack, and they're going to come for you. They're doubling down on the flavored tobacco products. This won't do anything. Why are flavored tobacco products banned in California? High nicotine products produced in kid-friendly flavors have led to a rapid increase in youth tobacco use in recent years. Okay, never mind that cigarette usage has declined, so it's probably somewhere right where it's always been. But Rob Bonta is going to save the kids. He's going to outlaw menthol cigarettes. And this new law is going to create a publicly available list of all permitted unflavored tobacco products offered for sale in the state. Whoopee! 50% of the cigarettes, and I'm sure 50% of the vape juice that's being sold out there is fucking black market. This will not stop. Like, these people think that it's going to protect California's youth from the harms of addictive flavored tobacco products. You fucking crazy. They're just going to find it on the black market. They're just going to buy it off of social media. Or they're just going to steal the unflavored stuff. You dreamers. You're just dreamers and you do nothing about this. Where are the education programs that we were promised with all the money that you were getting? All the taxes on weed that you've collected. Where is any of that? We're going to see a little more of this where they want to force a law, but they're not going to do any educating. So we're going to look at this past week. A lot of bills were up. Either Gavin was going to sign them or veto them. So I want to look at a few things because, remember, I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, okay? I live in California, which is controlled by the Democrats. And my purpose in life now is to get people to start thinking about a third party, somebody who's trying to operate with common sense as their cornerstone. So let's look at what Newsom's done, and let's see why the Democrats are so hated by me. Why a new California law will require tortilla makers to add an extra ingredient. Yeah, nixolation. You make corn tortillas, corn, water, lime, nixolation. Look it up. It's been around since the Aztecs. It is an ancient, traditional recipe that California is now going to fuck with. He has signed legislation that directs manufacturers of corn masa to add folic acid. And then you have to declare it. Oh. And why? Because pregnant Latina women, I guess that's redundant, pregnant Latinas are not taking their folic acid supplements. So instead of educating them on why they need folic acid, they need about 600 micrograms of folic acid to help ensure that the baby's born correctly. Instead of educating them, instead of spending money on educational programs or subsidizing folic acid if that's what it takes, they're going to fuck with a traditional recipe. So if you are Hispanic and you voted for the Democrats, here they are coming after something of yours because they've run out of ideas. So they're like, oh, let's do this. The truth of the matter is that amount of folic acid isn't going to lead to much in the tortillas. They could eat beans high in folic acid. High. 6 cups of beans and you're covered. Now, I don't know how many beans you're going to eat. I certainly don't know what that's going to result in. But it's also in leafy greens. It's also in citrus. We could be educating these women in the need to take folic acid and leave their fucking tortillas alone. I can't believe they've done this to mess with a traditional recipe. So here's some more. As they say here, the Sacramento Bee, Gavin Newsom shows his French laundry colors and some elitist legislative logic. New California law allows alcohol until 4 a.m., but only in one place. And guess where that is? An exclusive club inside Inglewood's new Intuit Dome. I was there, by the way. I've been to the Inuit Dome just less than 2 weeks after it opened. I saw 21 Pilots there. Fucking fabulous place. The people there were great. But to flat out say that we're going to extend the last call for alcohol by 2 hours, but in one place, an elite club, doesn't that say anything? Doesn't that should say something to people? And listen to the way they word this thing. The pilot law will allow alcoholic beverage service until 4 a.m. in a private area of a fully enclosed arena with a seating capacity of at least 1,800 seats located in the city of Inglewood. Really? And, oh, well, it's owned by Ballmer. Whoa, surprise. How much Ballmer's wife donated $1 million to Newsom to fight an attempt to recall him. Like Mike Trujillo, he's an LA-based Democratic strategist. The governor isn't wearing his reading glasses. The optics aren't great. Straight up an elitist law. But at the same time, okay, Dave Cortez, Democrat out of San Jose, authored a straightforward piece of legislation that presumed if a farm worker ended up suffering a heat-related injury, the cause of that ailment was his or her job. Newsom vetoed this. He vetoed a bill that was protecting farm workers. This is what that asshole Gavin Newsom said. There is no doubt that climate change, got to work that in, is causing an increase in extreme temperatures and that California farm workers need strong protections from the risk of heat-related illness. However, the creation of a heat illness presumption in the workers' compensation system is not an effective way to accomplish this goal. As the author says, where else would this farm worker have gotten heat illness? Getting a poolside tan a little too long at the club? Hanging out on the weekend? I'll tell you something. Truth of the matter is, if you were to sprain your ankle on a Saturday, you could hobble around, strap on your work boots, go to work on Monday, and oops, I had a fall. And now it's covered by workers' comp. Heat illness, speaking as somebody who has had it at least twice, you can't hold off that injury. You can't. When you have heat stroke, it is immediate. You go to the hospital immediately. I've been hospitalized for it before. All right, so technically, full disclosure, I was in a hospital-run rehab facility. So, being taken to the hospital wasn't quite that dramatic. But you couldn't delay it. And this is the kind of shit out of this guy. He's going to give an exclusive club in Inglewood an extra 2 hours to serve booze, which is fucking up this nation way worse than any drug or out. I mean, you talk about fentanyl. No, okay. Deep breath, kid. Deep breath, kid. He had a chance to protect farm workers. A lot of them who voted for him. Look at this one. Gavin Newsom. This is, by the way, from Audacity, which is now going to be owned by George Soros. So I'm guessing that this KNX News article will disappear. Gavin Newsom vetoes bill giving victims raped in juvenile facilities more time to sue. So the author of the bill, or an attorney John Manley, says the governor caved to union pressure when he vetoed this measure, calling it a full protection act for rapists. Wow. Yeah, this is going to disappear. Soros would remove this article. While he was appalled by Newsom's decision to veto, Manley said that because Republicans and Democrats alike in the legislature agreed on this bill, he is hopeful they will choose to override the governor. Please. These kids went into these youth camps. Yeah, sure, they committed a crime, but they don't deserve to be raped. And we have, across the board, done what we can to facilitate victims being able to come forward decades later. Because trauma like this, sometimes you can't deal with it for the statute of limitations. You know, kids take forever to process it. Kids block it out. I read an article today about a girl who found out that she had been molested. Her parents knew about it. The police knew about it, but they didn't say anything to her because she was passed out at the time. But she eventually started getting bits and pieces of memories coming forward. She started understanding the bits that she had been somewhat awake for. And to take away their right because the union says so. Don't even get me started on unions, okay? There was just a port strike, and it came out that the union leader lived in a $7 million estate. What else did we do? California governor signs reparations bill. Yay. We have issued a formal apology. We were a free state, but whatever, okay? We issued a formal apology for the state government's role in perpetuating slavery and the oppression of enslaved individuals. Really? I might have already said this before, but the death toll for the San Francisco earthquake was quite low because they didn't count the Chinese. All right? This is performative art. Big deal. Okay, we're sorry. We're sorry for slavery, something we didn't participate in. I'm sorry it happened, but I ain't giving you my personal apology because I don't have anything to do with it personally. I have no qualms with the nation saying we're sorry for it, but when you're vetoing bills to protect farm workers and rape victims, but your priorities are, hey, we got to say we're sorry for slavery, of which none of us participated in, and the state never participated in. Stupid. He's now going to cover IVF. Great. So insurance rates will go up. I'll tell you why insurance rates will go up. Because when insurance sets rates, they look at how much they think they're going to have to spend. Women from the age of 0, or, let's say from the age of 10 to 60, they don't necessarily have a lot of health problems. They don't have these big bills. IVF is going to be a big bill, so rates will have to go up. Newsom also signed a bill mandating inclusive hair education, because that's fucking important. If you've got whatever, I don't even know how to phrase it, because there is no such thing as standard hair. We're all different. We all have different hair types, oily, straight, curly, cool-ass afros. But it's not that that's such a bad thing to, mandate inclusive hair education. Okay, that's not a bad thing. But when it comes on the same cycle as you denying farm workers the rights to, a presumption of heat illness. I don't know, how do I say that? A presumption that you're telling the truth about the heat illness. Or rapists in juvenile facilities. But then you go ahead and you say, oh, we need IVF and inclusive hair education. It's just, you're not going after anything that's of any importance. But one thing they did do, here's another one. Local governments in California will be barred from establishing local laws that require residents present identification to vote in elections. Free for all. Now, I get it. I understand that there are some sort of built-in precautions. You need to know the address of the person. Whoa, how could you find that? One of the ways we could cut down on election fraud is by making sure that only people who are supposed to vote, vote. But they don't want that, so they're going to go after Huntington Beach. See? That's what they want. They're going after Huntington Beach because Huntington Beach is requiring people to show photo identification at the polls. California is one of 14 states that does not require voter ID at the polls. What? Okay, because you don't care. At the end of the day, you don't care. And look at Bonta here. Rob Bonta is just a creep. The right to freely cast your vote is the foundation of our democracy, and Huntington Beach's voter ID policy flies in the face of this principle. How? It's the law that you have ID, so everybody has to have ID. So asking somebody to prove that they are actually that person who lives at that address, how is that stopping people from voting? It's stopping criminals. It's stopping fraud. It's stopping exploitation of the voting process. That's what it's stopping. It is not stopping legitimate people from voting. Let's say that again so we have a soundbite for Instagram. Huntington Beach's voter ID policy does not stop legitimate voters from voting. It stops illegitimate people from voting. Period. Post it. These people are trying to control our elections so that they can have their elitist way. These are the kings and queens and princes and princesses of the old England. You don't want to live under this. You think you might. You think, they protect abortion. They protect the gays. Okay? That's what they're doing to keep you in line. But when they have ultimate power, they can ultimately do whatever the frick they want. And it's so un-American. Like I started this piece out, this whole thing out, I am in my mid-50s. I remember a day when we didn't have hatred for the Democrats or even hatred for the Republicans. We liked the moderates. We voted moderates. We balanced things out. A Republican governor, but a Democrat Senate. Things like that. Now it's just all this fucking straight up tribal mentality, and people just aren't seeing it. People are buying. They know what they're doing. Okay? These political parties are playing to their extremes. Wow. I hope you could, I hope you could see the passion or hear the passion and understand that I'm not trying to, I want people to vote for America. And if that means that you have to vote for somebody like Donald Trump, then we got to vote for Donald Trump. But at least Donald Trump was picked by his constituents, unlike Harris. Harris was a manipulation. We've seen how the Democrats, at least here in California, I have gotten a very clear view of how the Democrats manipulate the system. They manipulated the situation to get Harris in. Look, if they had been honest and said Biden's not going to run again, we're going to have a primary, it might not have been a black woman. It might have been a white man. It might have been a white woman. But that wasn't good enough for them. They had to have Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris talks about joy. We're going to close with this little funny one. Harris supporters trying to figure out how to convert joy into groceries. Because she just wants to get elected. She doesn't want to make the country better. She's flooding in with illegal immigrants. Her party routinely votes to protect the elite and to help the elite while not helping the average American. She will not help the world. She will continue to try to de-escalate Israel. She will treat Israel like Israel bears responsibility. These are far left people. These are no longer Democrats. You can't, if you are a member of the Democrat Party, you need to realize that the people representing you are leftists now. Maybe you could vote for the Green Party. Maybe you could just abstain from voting this time around and send a message to these people. Because I'll tell you this, if I honestly believed that Trump and Vance were bad for America, I wouldn't advocate for them. They're not my first choice. They're not maybe the best choice that could have been put up there. But they are for America. Trump, for all of his wealth, has spent his lifetime mingling amongst the normies, performing on wrestling, performing on television. He's seen the real world out there. And J.D. Vance comes from the real world. Much like all of us. J.D. Vance grew up poor. He went to the Marines. He then parlayed his Marine service into college and a good job where he started making money. He wrote a book. He's achieved everything. He knows what it feels to have the government trying to hold you back. Look, Trump Vance, I've said many times, not my first choice. But between the two likely candidates, we have to vote for America. We have to vote for sanity. We have to vote for common sense. We just have to. Because we don't have any other choice. We can't take 4 more years of this. We're 30 days away from the election. I can't believe it's even close. But it is. Because a lot of people are refusing to turn on their tribe. Trump is not going to enforce a nationwide abortion ban. The Supreme Court has already ruled that the federal government does not have that right. It's safe to vote for Trump. Because our other option is just so fucking dangerous. You know, if your kid's going to play with a gun, do you want him to play with a .357 or a BB gun? And that's what we're looking at right now. That type of choice. Anyhow, thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this at all, please like, subscribe, comment, whatever. You know, I love you all. I love America. I love the average American, and I just don't want to see it taken away. I'm Kid Copious. I'm Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another, and if you could do something to help somebody, do that thing. And when it really just starts raining down on you, dance it out.